The lesson of history is that we can. Before the Paris Climate Agreement was negotiated 10 years ago, the world was on course for 4 degrees centigrade of global warming. Now national commitments imply 2.6 degrees of warming, or global warming below 2 degrees if countries meet their full climate targets. We remain way off track from where we need to be as a world, but we in this country have helped make a difference across parties. In 2008, this House came together to pass the world's first Climate Change Act under a Labour government supported by Lord Cameron and the Conservative Party and parties across this House. Mr. Speaker, thanks to the power of our example, now nearly 60 countries in the world have similar legislation. In 2019, under Baroness May, the UK became the first major economy to legislate for net zero by 2050, supported by the Labour Party and parties across this House. Now in part thanks to the actions at COP26 in Glasgow, including the leadership of Lord Sharma as president of the COP. 80% of global GDP is covered by net zero commitments. In 2021, England became the first country to introduce a legal duty to halt species decline by 2030, led by Boris Johnson and supported by parties across this House. Now 196 countries are signed up to the Global Biodiversity Framework to halt and reverse nature loss. Mr. Speaker, the lesson is clear. The choices we make as a country have influenced the course of global action, and in doing so reduce the impact of the climate and nature crisis on future generations in Britain. To those who say Britain cannot make a difference, I say you are wrong. Stop talking our country down. British leadership matters. We also know that climate and nature action has huge potential upside, and not just for future generations. It has the potential for better lives today in energy security, lower bills, cleaner air, good jobs, better health and well-being, and improved access to nature. So this government believes in sticking to our traditions as a country of climate and nature leadership. Indeed, turning away now, at this moment of all moments, when the threat and opportunity are clearer than ever, would be the greatest dereliction of duty and betrayal of future generations. That is why one of the government's 5 missions is to achieve clean power by 2030 and accelerate to net zero across the economy. That's why at COP29, we announced a 1.5 degree aligned target for 2035 based on legislation passed under the last Conservative government. That's why we're driving forward on our commitments to protect 30% of our land and seas for nature and halt species loss by the end of the decade. UK's history at the spending review, which will drive jobs across the country. And because the actions we need are not just about government, we are also determined to help communities take climate and nature action in their own areas, from driving the expansion of local and community-owned clean energy projects through Great British Energy to supporting mayors and local government to accelerate action. And at COP30 and beyond, we're determined to once again use the power of our example to work with others to uphold the objectives of the Paris Agreement, including with ambitious climate targets, action to accelerate the clean energy revolution, and protection of nature and forests. But, Mr. Speaker, as I have said, action on emissions is not enough on its own. We must also protect the British people from the impacts we already see and, sadly, the greater impacts we are likely to see in the future. This work, led by my right friend, the Environment Secretary, requires action across society, from homes and buildings to critical infrastructure to our natural environment. We are now delivering Britain's largest ever flood defence programme, investing £7.9 billion over the next decade in flood barriers and nature-based solutions like wetland restoration. This comes alongside pioneering local nature recovery strategies with measures like tree planting and peat restoration that deliver adaptation and nature recovery together. And in my department, as we drive forward on our plan to upgrade millions of homes, we've consulted on expanding the boiler upgrade scheme to include air-to-air heat pumps, which can offer cooling as well as heating. But, Mr. Speaker, I need to be candid with the House. We know this is just the beginning of the reckoning we need about how our country needs to adapt across all parts of society in the years to come. And this government is determined to put climate resilience at the heart of our decision-making. Mr. Speaker, let me close by saying that we've been at our best in this House when we've worked across parties on these issues. I want to thank the Honourable Member for South Cotswolds for introducing the Climate and Nature Bill, my honourable friends and members for Sheffield Hallam and Leeds Central and Headingley for our discussions earlier this year and the run-up to that bill, as well as the other co-sponsors who highlighted the need for today's statement. And let me take this opportunity to pay tribute to current and former members across the House for their tireless advocacy on climate and nature. And Mr. Speaker, I'll end by saying this. The safety of our citizens, our natural world, the country we pass on, is not a Labour cause or a Conservative cause or that of any other party. It is a British cause. It is a cause of us all, and a cause that requires all of us to consider our responsibilities to the generations of today and the generations to come. And I commend this statement to the House.
Secretary of State Andrew Ballard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is a rare pleasure to see the Secretary of State in his place at the dispatch box today, having turned down the opportunity to defend his Clean Power 2030 plan or the NISA report earlier this year. Maybe that's why we're getting a slightly longer than usual statement today, making up for missed opportunities. But, Mr. Speaker, we do welcome this report today, and it does make for interesting reading. I think we can all attest to the fact that in Britain today it is warmer than before. We all agree that the challenge of the changing climate is vast, one of many challenges facing the United Kingdom today. But I must tell the House, tell the right honourable gentleman, that ridiculous statements like that made this morning by the Environment Secretary labelling opponents of net zero as unpatriotic is frankly as offensive as it is risible and does nothing to advance the cause. I must also add mine and many others' growing sense of unease at the language emanating from those around the Net Zero Secretary, accusing anyone who dares question the policies or plans being worked on by his department as being deniers or being supportive of an end to our British way of life. We need to bring back a sense of rationality, of proportion to this debate, because out there, language like this is alienating more and more people from the important cause of ensuring that the planet we pass on to our children and theirs is in a better state than the one we inherited at the minute. Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State calls this radical truth-telling, but I'm afraid he's not being honest with the British people about the impact of their plans on the climate, on bills, on jobs, and on the sacrifices that it demands. The Leader of the Opposition has been very clear. Chasing net zero by 2050 is unachievable without making the country worse off. That is the truth. Mr. Speaker, global warming is a global issue which we cannot face alone. The global climate challenge will not be solved by the UK alone, and it cannot be solved on the backs of British workers or British bill payers. Yes.
So we need to be careful on what we said. I think the suggestion was the Secretary of State wasn't honest. I think we're all honest members in here.
Mr. Speaker, and I apologise if I in any way insinuated the opposite. The United Kingdom accounts for less than 1% of global emissions. That is also the truth. In fact, Mr. Speaker, now I come to think of it, it is rather shameful that the Secretary of State should be using this report from the Met Office's cover, whilst ratcheting up the language, whilst increasing the shrill criticism of all those who question the department and its policies, all to distract from the fact that the plans mean that Britain will be poorer and that no one looking at how we are decarbonised could ever claim that this is a model to follow. We are proud to have been a world leader, but it isn't a race. You don't give way in a statement, but it isn't a race if nobody else is running. If we are leading the way, we need to make sure it is a path others will follow. We must decarbonise in a way that creates energy security and prosperity, rather than forcing industry abroad and impoverishing the British people. Why is that so hard for the party opposite to understand? Now, we see in the Met Office's report that the demand for cooling has approximately doubled, a strong case for introducing more air conditioning into homes, improving comfort and reducing the burden on the health system during heatwaves. So, whilst I welcome his commitment to expand the boiler upgrade scheme to include air-to-air heat pumps, which, as he says, offer cooling as well as heating, can I urge the Secretary of State to speak to the Mayor of London and get the ridiculous restrictions on air conditioning units in new builds in London removed? We must move away from this poverty mindset on reducing energy usage. Paying solar panels to switch off whilst refusing to absorb that excess to demand to cool homes is truly ridiculous. It's time to take the global scale and nature of this challenge seriously. Offshoring manufacturing like ceramics does not solve global warming, but it does make Britain poorer. It does make Brits unemployed. To build this government's 1.5 million new homes, we will be using more bricks than at any time since the Second World War. But thanks to this government, fewer than ever before will actually be made here in Britain. Perhaps on his recent visit to the People's Republic of China, whilst admiring their fast-paced build of new renewable generation and new nuclear low-carbon energy on an unseen scale, he was able to reflect on the factors enabling this. The opening of 2 new coal-fired power stations every week, the cost of industrial energy in China less than a third of our domestic cost. We cannot innovate, manufacture, create growth and prosperity whilst energy costs are killing manufacturing. Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid that this government's plans will drive up the underlying cost of energy to industry, and Britain will be paying the price. Only a year ago, Labour candidates were trotting out lines on how they would cut bills by £300. Since then, network charges, which account for 22% of an energy bill, have risen by over £100 as a result of the rush to build out the grid for new renewables. Cornwall Insights and independent energy analysts have called for the Secretary of State to be transparent about what the money is being spent on. The principal consultant urged the Secretary of State to be honest with the public about the impact of net zero policy costs on bills. Of course, a clean, secure and reliable power source does exist in nuclear, and whilst we do welcome the announcements a few weeks ago of the commitment to Sizewell C and the SMR programme, but the lack of ambition, the refusal to commit to a 3rd gigawatt scale reactor, preferably on Anglesey, the decision to decommission the UK stockpile of plutonium, the selection of only 1 small modular reactor technology and the refusal to repeat the 24 gigawatt ambition that we set out for nuclear industry is frustrating. We could do so much more. So will the Secretary of State commit to protecting Wilfa for a new gigawatt-scale reactor in the future? Mr. Speaker, it is indeed time for a policy of radical honesty. Global warming is a global challenge, and his plans will have a negligible or even negative impact on global emissions, I am afraid, driven sadly by ideology, not by practicalities of facing this challenge whilst growing the economy. We are telling the difficult truths. They are running from reality.
I mean, I'll be honest, Mr. Speaker, I just feel incredibly sad to listen to the honourable gentleman, and not in a good way. I mean, the trouble is, we're in a situation now where the Shadow Secretary of State goes into hiding when there's a statement about the climate crisis, because it's just too embarrassing to try and articulate the government's the opposition's position. And look, the central chasm at the heart of his response is that he and his colleagues have taken the decision to abandon 20 years of bipartisanship when it comes to climate. I said one of the great strides forward was Theresa May's net zero by 2050. Now he's trashing it and saying it was a disaster. And let's be honest, it is grossly irresponsible, because we're expected to believe that the reason that they're doing it is because they know 25 years in advance of that target that it can't be achieved. But they can't possibly know that. Indeed, the Climate Change Committee says exactly the opposite in their latest report. He says he's worried about costs, but actually all the evidence is delaying action costs more, not less. The CCC says net zero will cut energy bills and the costs of motoring. And then we don't even know whether they want a net zero target at all or no net zero target ever. And he said something about the other week about this isn't based, as I read his interviews with care, in my spare time. He said something about it's not based on the science, net zero by 2050. He is absolutely wrong, because this is what the IPCC said, the international body, in model pathways with no or limited overshoot of 1.5 degrees. Global net CO2 emissions declined by about 45% from 2010 levels by 2030, reaching net zero around 2050. The point is, net zero was a target that Theresa May adopted, driven by the science. So what are they? They are anti-science, they are anti-jobs, they are anti-energy security, and they are anti-future generations. And I have to say, I can't put it better than Theresa May, and he should be quiet because he used to work for her. I can't put it better than Theresa May, and this is what she said. Theresa May, she was a former Conservative Prime Minister just 5 years ago. Those of us who advocate accelerating our progress towards net zero emissions are labelled fanatics and zealots. Ironically, the name-calling often emanates from ideologues at the political extremes or from populists who offer only easy answers to complex questions. I couldn't put it better myself, Mr. Speaker.
Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. look, select committees look at the evidence, we follow the evidence, we make recommendations on the evidence. What we've heard from the Secretary of State today is the evidence from the Met Office about the seriousness of the threat, the reality of the nature of the crisis, and the fact that this will only grow. The Shadow Minister actually missed something, because he needs to acknowledge the costs of not taking action, not just the costs of action. And the Secretary of State read them out. £200 billion, 8% of GDP if we get 3 degrees of warming, according to the OBR. So, Mr. Speaker, those opposing climate action in this place can see the evidence too. They can see that cheaper driving and home heating are already available to many people, and we should be making them available to as many people as possible. And those opposing climate action also know that switching to low-carbon electricity as much as we can and as fast as we can is how we make this country safer, by getting control of our energy generation and supply. So does the Secretary of State agree that the patriotic approach is to work together to cut emissions for financial, for security, for nature and for climate reasons?
I think my honourable friend puts it very well, Mr. Speaker. And look, I think one of the things that I have experienced over the last 20 years is that we haven't had a culture war on climate, because the Conservative Party and the Labour Party in particular chose to say this really matters. And I think my honourable friend puts it so well, which is the Conservative Party has abandoned its belief in climate action, apparently, at precisely the time when, as the CCC shows in Carbon Budget 7, for example, that actually this is the way to reduce costs for people. I make this other point today. I notice there are young people watching the public gallery and elsewhere. And what message do we send to them by saying, look, we just can't act on this? I mean, it is such a betrayal of future generations who have genuine anxiety about what world they're going to inherit from us.
Ross Savage, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Secretary of State, or indeed both Secretaries of State, for today's momentous statement, which I trust will be the first of many annual climate and nature statements. I also thank them for recognising the role of Zero Hour and the campaigners behind the Climate and Nature Bill, the private members' bill I'm proud to have brought to this House with cross-party support. I warmly welcome the move towards more joined-up thinking between DESNZ and DEFRA, and also applaud the willingness of the government to work across the House, even if that willingness is not always reciprocated. However, this statement has missed a trick. The Secretary of State promised collaboration with campaigners, NGOs and communities. In reality, engagement so far has been very limited. If stakeholders had been involved, he might have acknowledged calls from the wildlife trusts and the RSPB to remove the threat to nature protection in the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, or the nature-friendly farming network's concern over the suspension of the Sustainable Farming Incentive. He also told the Environmental Audit Committee that this would be a public participation issue, yet there was no consultation with the Climate and Nature Bill campaigners ahead of this statement. If we want to bring communities with us, we have to include them and listen to them. People across the country are already driving change in their communities, in schools, in farms and businesses to build a better, greener future. The government should be tapping into that great British human energy, to coin a phrase. Liberal Democrats are proud to be doing exactly that, with policies like an emergency home insulation programme, solar panels on every new build, investment in cheap renewable energy, support for community energy, local nature recovery strategies, and an extra £1 billion for nature-friendly farming. Because people need hope and a role in shaping the solutions. Despair is not a strategy and action is not optional. It is essential and urgent to protect our health, our economy and our national security. And so I ask again, when will the Secretary of State meet with me, with my fellow Liberal Democrats, Zero Hour and the environmental NGOs to create an annual climate and nature bill that is bold and ambitious, that brings transparency and hope and shows that the government is genuinely bridging the gap between policy and delivery?
Yes.
Well, let me start off in the spirit of continued generosity in reiterating my praise for the Honourable Lady for bringing forward the bill, and indeed the zero-hour campaigners who I have met in a previous incarnation of mine, and you know, their role over a long period in pushing forward the bill has been important. Very happy to meet her and the campaigners. And indeed, this is going to be, as she knows, this is going to be a continuing process, as I discussed with her, and you know, happy to take forward those discussions. Let me just address the substantive point she made about climate and nature, because I think it is important. Look, what this government is striving to do is to build the low carbon energy infrastructure we need in a way that is nature positive. And if you look at, for example, the Nature Recovery Fund that we are putting in place, it's absolutely about doing that. Now, look, I know that, you know, some people don't agree with that approach, but we're trying to do two things here, which is build the clean energy infrastructure that is required to get us off fossil fuels, which I know she wants to see, and at the same time protect and restore nature, and I'm convinced that we can do that. I think the point I would end on, I just urge her to think, you know, if we're going to fulfill our net zero ambitions, and these are stretching targets, we do have to build this infrastructure. And I say to all members of the House, the easy thing is to say no, but the right thing to do is very often to say yes to the energy infrastructure we need.
Billington.
Much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement today, and particularly the importance that my right honourable friend has emphasised about how climate change and nature loss are fundamentally linked and contribute to each other. I'd also like to remind the House that after the National Health Service, the thing that this country loves most is its natural environment. Yeah. And understanding the vital role that nature itself plays in tackling climate change will be absolutely vital in the years ahead. I would like to particularly refer to the importance of salt marsh. I talk quite often with my honourable friend for the Western Isles about the importance of peatland, but also salt marsh is vital as a climate valuable habitat. Will my right honourable friend confirm that in the light of what he's been talking about today, that we will have a proper integrated energy spatial plan, national planning policy framework and the land use framework so that those climate valuable habitats are properly protected?
My honourable friend speaks with great authority and indeed conviction on these subjects, and she's absolutely right about the role of nature. I would also add, I'll come to her question in a second, but I would also add the biggest threat to nature that we face is indeed the climate crisis. And the figures I read out from scientific authorities show the scale of the threat that's already there to our countryside. And as I said in my statement, the threat is only going to get worse. On the land use framework, we're currently, I think, having been consulting on this, and we're going to come up with a final document later on this year. But she makes an absolutely crucial point about the need for coordination of the land use framework, the strategic spatial energy plan, which together mean that we use our land in a sensible way and that we build the energy infrastructure we need.
I agree with the Secretary of State that it is very important that other countries follow our example. And can he tell us, of the 5 countries which are the worst emitters of greenhouse gases, emitting over 50% in total, namely USA, Russia, Brazil, India, and of course China, how many of them have adopted similar legislation, and what hope does he have that those 5 in particular will follow our example?
Well, he asked a good question. Let me give him 3 examples of those 5. India has a target of 500 gigawatts of renewables by 2030 and a net zero 2070 target. China now has nearly half of the world's renewable capacity, is committed to peaking its emissions before 2030, and they have a net zero 2060 target. But of course I want them to do more, and Brazil has set out an ambitious NDC. So I think it's right that he asked this question. And I think I'm right in saying that as of March 2025, fossil fuels accounted for less than 50% of electricity generation in the US. So, you know, look, not every country is going at the same pace, but I think if you look across the world, and you know, there are countries that are more sceptical, but if you look across the world, there has just been a decisive shift over. I was Climate Change Secretary in 2008 to 2010. Net zero wasn't even talked about. I mean, there has been a transformation in the extent to which countries are taking this seriously.
Can I just say, I really do want to get everybody in, so I need a lot of help from the front bench to speed things up. I'm sure he wants to do that. And a good example will be Toby Perkins, Chair of the Audit Committee.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. I share the Secretary of State's despair that the consensus in these matters appears to be dissipating. Does he agree with me that that is incredibly damaging for investment in this sector? Because what investors really need to see is that whoever is in government, whatever happens in elections, that they have a government that is committed to this agenda. And further to that, does he also agree that it's completely wrong to say that Britain is the only country that's taking this serious? In fact, countries like China are absolutely leading the way in investing in technologies that are needed, and we need to be catching up, making sure everyone knows Britain's open for business in this sector.
My honourable friend, who speaks with such expertise on these matters, is 100% right. The biggest enemy of investment is uncertainty. That's why I appeal to all parties to, you know, stick to the law that we have legislated for in this country to give that certainty.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise not to call the Secretary of State a Nico warrior, as some members of this House are so keen on doing from time to time. In fact, when he describes the scale of the climate and nature emergency, I agree with him. But the fact of the matter is, and I don't want to spoil the cross-party support here, but the fact of the matter is that when in opposition, the Labour Party promised an investment of £28 billion in the just and green transition. So will he now apologise to the people of Scotland, no, the voters in Scotland, for reneging on that promise?
What I will say to the people of Scotland is that for years people have talked about the Acorn carbon capture and storage project, and it is happening because of a Labour government. We've got a publicly owned energy company, Great British Energy. We've got our clean industry bonus. This is the government that is actually delivering for the people of Scotland and across the UK.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I welcome the Secretary of State's statement, not least because as someone outside this House before I was elected was calling for such a measure under the previous Conservative government. I think it's a really important thing to be doing. Not least because I think it underscores the government's approach to clean energy and wider climate action to tackle and mitigate those many climate impacts that many of us are already seeing. We've just come off the back of 3 heat waves, to lower bills, strengthen our economy, and yes, in a patriotic way, ensure our national security. But does he, like me, I think he echoed in his statement, lament the loss of that cross-party consensus? The Conservative leader says net zero is impossible. The Deputy Leader of Reform says climate science is garbage. One denies urgency, the other denies reality, and both deny the evidence from the Met Office, climate scientists, and indeed the experience of their own constituents. So does he agree with me that when young people and future generations ask who stood in the way of their precious inheritance of cleaner air, local green space, it will be the Conservatives and Reform?
Please, I need you to help me to get colleagues in. All colleagues from both sides want to get in this, otherwise it's not going to happen. Secretary of State.
That bit was great, though. My honourable friend is like so right about this, and it's not where the British people are. The British people want action on climate. They don't want a culture war. And, frankly, wherever you live in the country, you want to pass on a livable country to your kids and your grandkids.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, those of us who advocate for the North Sea oil and gas sector are not climate change deniers, but we are realists who understand that we will need oil and gas for years to come, but replacing our domestic supply with imports has 4 times the carbon intensity, that in a global context China emits in 10 days what we do in a year, and that we will not transition to a cleaner energy if we make ourselves poorer. So while I recognise today's report, does the Secretary of State accept that increasing our relative use of imported gas will only make us more carbon intensive in the future?
Got to get our use of imported gas down, and that's why we've got to build the clean energy infrastructure. The point is, this is what the Conservative Party just don't seem to understand. If they go around the country opposing our clean energy infrastructure, it keeps us stuck on fossil fuels for longer, and look where that took us, the worst cost of living crisis in generations.
Lineal.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State will know that my constituency, more than most, knows what it means to host clean energy infrastructure. However, the failure of the cross-party consensus is giving rise to quite a lot of concern in my area because we are facing job losses at LOR Prax. Can the Secretary of State please give some reassurance to those hundreds of workers that are facing a very uncertain time that this is not as a result of a move towards clean energy, but is as a result of mismanagement by the owners of that company?
My honourable friend speaks about an important issue, and I am deeply concerned for those workers and their families. And there are serious questions to answer about the running of that company and how it ended up in this state. That's why I wrote on the day that the insolvency happened to the Insolvency Service to ask to look into this matter, because I think those workers have been badly let down by the company.
Tim Farron.
Mr. Speaker, nobody knows better than farmers the reality of climate change and the importance of tackling it immediately. It is bizarre that their expertise has been ignored by people. We should stand with them. Extreme weather conditions are a threat to animal welfare, to agricultural productivity and to farm business survival. We desperately need a food security strategy. We only produce 55% of the food we eat already in this country. So how will he help our farmers to be resilient against the twin threats of drought and flooding?
Well, the honourable gentleman, right honourable gentleman, speaks with sort of great expertise on this matter, partly because of his local constituency. I think he's absolutely right about the threat to farmers' livelihoods, which I talked about in my statement, from the climate crisis, and the need for food security. I know it's something that my right honourable friend takes incredibly seriously, and indeed the whole land use framework is partly making sure that we have the land we need for our food security.
I want to thank my right honourable friend for this statement. I've waited 14 years for it, and I look forward to the next 14 years of it being given to this House. One of the key drivers of climate change, of course, is deforestation. One of the key drivers of deforestation is cattle ranching and soy production. And one of the key drivers of cattle ranching and soy production is the City of London finance, which is used to bankroll what is happening. What restrictions can he bring in against the financial designs of the city to make sure that we are stopping this at source?
Well, my honourable friend raises an important issue about the potential role of the City of London, and I think also the potential positive role of the City of London. One of the things that we are consulting on at the moment is transition plans, mandatory transition plans for large companies and financial institutions, including in the City of London, precisely so that we can make sure that the investment goes in the right places.
Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the Secretary of State's statement, including on the importance of Britain showing leadership and of us rebuilding cross-party consensus. But even if we haven't quite got cross-party consensus on the need for transition to a green economy, does he agree that the fact that we've seen hundreds of deaths just in London in the second heat wave of the year, the fact that our farmers are facing the driest start to the year in my lifetime, the fact that people around the country have suffered from floods in recent years, does he agree that the need for us to show resilience in the face of a changing climate cannot be a political football? And if so, would he support a sixth government mission on ensuring that we're protecting the British public from the changes in the climate?
Well, look, on the last bit, it's very much part of our mission to, as we tackle net zero, to do what he says. I think the first part of his question is very, very important, though, which is, you know, when I listen to some folks in this House, you know, we see it all around us. I mean, it's not like we're gazing into a crystal ball because some set of boffins have told us that something bad might happen in the future. It's happening now. I mean, the idea that we're a country with wildfires in Surrey and in Scotland, I mean, if you'd said that 15 years ago, people would have said you're mad. And there's no way that's going to happen. We're not going to have wildfires in Britain, he'd have said. So I think the honourable gentleman speaks very well about something very, very important. We need to look at with our own eyes at what is happening.
Ruth Cadbury. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also very much welcome the Energy Secretary's statement today. Madam Deputy Speaker, adequate EV charging infrastructure, depot charging and onshore power for shipping are all critical to the government's net zero challenge. Businesses and providers across the transport sector making investment decisions now need a route map. So what steps is the Energy Secretary making to prioritise grid connections, and will he commit to reforming the grid queuing system so that projects essential to decarbonise our transport sector are brought forward more quickly?
Well, my honourable friend speaks about a very important subject. We are dealing with the zombies, the grid zombies, the zombie queue, and that reordering of the queue is precisely designed to open up the queue to projects like the ones she talked about, and my honourable friend, the Energy Minister, is having a series of roundtables with DfT on precisely this subject.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State has said that he wants to tell some hard truths. So can he tell the House directly, without spin and waffle, and without dodging answering these questions, how much, in cash terms, would it cost the UK to get to net zero? Who would pay the cost? And how much would the UK getting to net zero reduce global temperatures by?
All of these details are set out in the Climate Change Committee report, which she can look for herself at the carbon budget. In carbon budget 7, they are set out. They are set out, and actually, the cost of getting to net zero have been coming down, actually, because when I set the 80% target, that actually the costs of getting there, according to the Climate Change Committee, were actually higher than they are now to get to net zero. But I just make this point gently to her. The costs of inaction are much greater than the costs of action.
Henry Tufnell.
Deputy Speaker, and can I commend the Secretary of State for his statement?
Yeah.
And I share his view that we have a responsibility for generations to come, and that my constituents want to be part of that just transition. So can I ask the Secretary of State that he is also committed to that just transition that protects jobs and prevents decarbonisation through deindustrialisation?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right about this, and we've got to make sure that as we take this journey, we do everything we can to protect existing industries and workers and give them the smooth transition. And the way we do that is by ensuring that we have levers through government to intervene to make that happen, whether that is Great British Energy or the National Wealth Fund or our Clean Industries bonus to create the jobs of the future. If I can give the example of the North Sea, 70,000 jobs have been lost in the North Sea in less than a decade because it's a declining basin. The answer has got to be to create those jobs of the future, and that's what this government is determined to do.
Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The impact of climate change is being felt today in my constituency of Bicester and Woodstock. At Pegtop Farm, they are racing to bring in the harvest after such a dry, hot spring when they expect yields to be less than half what they would normally be. On the 23rd and 24th of September last year, we had extensive surface flooding, which flooded many homes at the time. So can the Secretary of State set out what share of the flood defence budget will deal with surface rather than river flooding? And how would he characterise the relevant responsibilities of national and local governments, developers, water companies, insurers and householders?
Well, he asked a complex question. I think I might volunteer my right honourable friend to write to him so that I get it right. But it's something I know because he was whispering to me the answer. It's something he takes very seriously.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Secretary of State, not just for his statement today, but his continued commitment to tackling the climate and nature crisis facing us. He said it was something that we must all tackle together, and there is a huge part of our communities, the faith communities, that want to do exactly that. So while we welcome Great British Energy's rollout of solar panels on hospitals and on schools, could he outline any support for religious buildings that also want to do the same?
Hear, hear.
So following the successful rollout to schools and hospitals, we've now got a lot of requests to expand this scheme, and I'm very enthusiastic about doing so, and it's something we're looking at.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I just say to the Secretary of State, I'm as passionate as he is about achieving net zero across the world and about the declining species in our natural environment. But that can't be the only thing we worry about, because I don't know whether the Secretary of State's had time to read the Fiscal Risks and Sustainability report produced last week, which shows that achieving net zero will, and I quote, at 21% of GDP is the cost of the public exchequer of that. And we know that there's an argument going on inside the government and inside the Labour Party about this very issue, and it's a question of balancing the risks. Because if the government runs out of money because it's overspending, there won't be any money to spend on reversing climate change.
I have read the report, and the bit he didn't mention is it says that if we end up in a 3-degree world, we add 56% of GDP to net debt. That is the cost of inaction. You see, this is the point. Nick Stern did a report, Lord Stern did a report in the 2000s, which said the costs of inaction are greater than the costs of action. And this OBR fiscal risks report sets it out very clearly. We lose 8% of our GDP by 2070 if we don't act. And so, of course, there is a cost to acting, and they say there are different scenarios for public investment, private investment, from acting. But the evidence in that report could not be clearer about the costs of inaction, and they're far greater than the costs of action.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I was privileged to host a net zero roundtable in my constituency. Many from a wide variety of political backgrounds who were all appalled to see net zero become a political football and part of an ongoing culture war on the right. So will the Secretary of State join me in recognising the important work of organisations like Comes Off Net Zero, like the North Tyne Climate Action Group, in bringing together widespread support for net zero, putting it into our communities and embedding it across the body politic?
Well, my honourable friend is a great champion for Hexham, and it's with great pleasure that I recognise the role of these groups. And he and I have talked on a number of occasions about the importance of climate action to so many of his constituents, and I look forward to working with him on these issues in the months ahead.
Tulip Sadiq. Oh, sorry.
Last week, 20 of my constituents from Hampstead and Highgate came from the Climate Coalition, Mothers Climate Action Network, Our Grandchildren's Climate, the Hampstead Neighbourhood Forum and the Camden Fixing Factory to see me, and they were very clear that COP30 is a pivotal moment to restore momentum on tackling climate change, but also to tackle the misinformation which is on the rise not just online but in mainstream political parties. So could I ask the Secretary of State, what leadership is the UK showing at COP30 to ensure that we tackle this misinformation? But more importantly, what is he doing to ensure that powerful international partners who may not be on the same page as us when it comes to climate change is coming along with us on this journey, because it's only collective action which is going to solve this very serious crisis?
Well, my honourable friend speaks with great expertise on these issues and passion, and she's absolutely right about this. This is about what we do to engage with other countries. We had an environment dialogue with the Chinese minister a couple of weeks ago in London. I engaged with the Chinese, India, Brazil, all of them absolutely key. Brazil obviously is host of COP30. She's right that COP30 is a crucial moment where we show that we are continuing to take action, and that's what we're determined to do.
Simon Paul.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a sponsor of the Climate and Nature Bill, I welcome the Secretary of State's statement this afternoon. He's right to highlight that it's a national crisis, and many of us across the House are, I think, right to point out that it cannot be ignored and that inaction has too great a cost in doing so. But he will be aware that costs are politicising this issue for many people in this country. There's legislation before the House currently with regards to pensions and where they and how they invest. Can he assure the House that he is talking to Treasury and local government ministers to ensure that the maximum amount from those pension funds, particularly but not exclusively the local government pension fund, can be invested in those green energy projects? It will widen the investment base and therefore hopefully will reduce costs depoliticising the issue and seeing the greening of our energy generation that we all want to see.
Well, look, can I warmly thank the honourable gentleman for his contribution. Can I thank him for his sponsorship of the Climate and Nature Bill? He is the voice of good sense. I hope that isn't the sort of kiss of death. He's the voice of good sense on the Conservative benches. He raises a really, really important issue about pensions and pension investments, and it's one I'll take up.
Can I just say I really want to get all members in this afternoon, so can we have shorter questions and answers, please? Jacob Collier.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Secretary of State's statement and also the fact that my local hospital will have solar panels on it thanks to this Labour government. That's thousands that are going to be saved that can go directly back to frontline services. What more can he do to ensure that public buildings like hospitals and prisons have these solar panels fitted so we can lower costs but also contribute to our climate goals?
My honourable friend is completely right about this, and it's a scheme we want to expand. It's been incredibly successful, and it's a no-brainer, using these natural resources of the sun to cut energy bills and release money for frontline services.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The statement from the Energy Secretary sounded like a desperate attempt to save his own job. But he's right. The British people do need protecting. They need protecting from the Energy Secretary, because businesses that I visit every single week say that his madcap ideas are killing growth, killing business and killing jobs. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt if he can answer one simple question, which he's already refused to answer. By how much will the Earth's temperature be reduced by if the UK became net zero tomorrow? Simple question.
And the answer, which he just doesn't want to accept, is this. If he just listens, the answer is this: I believe in British leadership. I believe in Britain's ability to make a difference. And the truth is, when we, as I said in my statement, when we passed the Climate Change Act, 60 countries followed. When we legislated for net zero, many other countries followed. He talks Britain down. I believe in Britain.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank God there's somebody in this chamber trying to actually save the planet. But actually, net zero makes good common sense for lots of our constituents when they recognise this is not just about climate security, and those of us who faced floods in our constituency know how expensive those are. It's also about national security and the cost of living. Moving towards sustainable electricity would put both Rosebank and Putin out of business. But the Secretary of State will know, on current plans, bill players will be wasting £8 billion a year switching off wind farms by 2030 if we don't take action. How can we stop this transfer of wealth from citizens to corporations so that we can invest in community energy?
My honourable friend is absolutely right about this. We inherited a shocking state of the infrastructure, the failure to build the grid infrastructure. The best thing we can do is accelerate that grid infrastructure. If we can do that, we can reduce those constraint payments, and I look forward to support from all parts of the House for this.
Munira Wilson.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State rightly says that British leadership matters and that the choices we make as a country will have an impact on future generations. I don't doubt his personal commitment to tackling climate change and delivering net zero. But is he really sure that all his cabinet colleagues, not least the Chancellor of the Exchequer, are on the same page as him, given her unwavering commitment to expanding not just Heathrow, but Gatwick, Luton, City and Stansted, despite the advice and concerns of the Climate Change Committee?
Yes, I am. Yes, I can tell her that we've never had a Chancellor of the Exchequer so committed to these issues, because we had the biggest investment in clean, homegrown energy in our history in the recent spending review.
Andrew Lewin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Welwyn Hatfield stands to be a big beneficiary of the Social Housing Warm Homes Plan. They won a grant of £6 million, which means hundreds of homes are going to be upgraded, retrofitted, which sees bills coming down and emissions coming down. Now, our colleagues from Reform have a flair for language, and they talk about net stupid zero. I'm interested to know what my right honourable friend thinks and what language he would use to describe a party that is opposing a policy that will cut emissions and cut bills for people living in council homes in my community.
Well, look, we're just advocating for common sense here. Why not use the natural resources that we have to have warmer homes for people and cut emissions? I think they're the extremists, frankly.
Sammy Wilson.
The real driver, of course, behind this statement today is the fact that the Minister is losing the argument with his colleagues, who are now challenging the impact of his policies on economic growth. He's trying to cover up for the costs, which the OBR revealed last week at £30 billion per year, £800 billion over the period. Businesses are struggling under power bills that are making them bankrupt, and consumers are resisting the net zero demands to fly less, eat less meat and buy cars that they don't want. As a Minister, does he not see a connection between the anxiety he talks about with young people and the disgraceful scare tactics he has made today, all to enable him to say that Britain is taking the lead? All I can say to the Minister is this: if Britain's taking the lead since the Paris Agreement, emissions have gone up by 30%, he might be leading, but he doesn't have too many followers.
Well said. Well, the honourable gentleman and I have been arguing about these issues for about 20 years, so I think I'm unlikely to persuade him. Normally we have good-natured discussions about this. I have to say to him, the idea that this is scaremongering, I mean, when we see with our own eyes what is happening, as the honourable gentleman sitting in front of him said earlier on in this statement, we see it with our own eyes. And I have to say, what he is doing and what he's advocating for would be a total betrayal, not just actually of future generations, but today's generations.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just want to say that the Secretary of State has been a global leader in this space for 20 years. We talked about we all know about the Climate Change Act, but at COP15 in Copenhagen, without his intervention, the world would not have agreed. The world would be on a worse trajectory today on the climate without his singular intervention. I think the whole House needs to hear that. Looking forward to COP30 in Belém, we all know that now we need significant afforestation and the repairing of the world's ecosystems, whether that's peat bogs or permafrost or seagrass. What is his plan for leading in that space at COP30?
Well, my honourable friend is very kind. If I'm frank with him, when I met with a group of young people earlier on today, I felt a sense of responsibility that no country is yet doing enough on these issues, and we need to do more because they are fearful about the world they will inherit, and they look to government to show leadership. On the issue he mentions, it's very, very important, and we will make sure that we make it absolutely part of our agenda at COP30.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hosepipe bans rightly anger my constituents in mid-Sussex, and it frustrates them and me because it speaks to decades of failure to put in place the provisions that will prepare us for a changing climate that is livable for our children. How can people be expected to support large-scale house building that those same children will need when our water companies fail to fix the leaks, pollute our rivers and too often fail to even provide clean drinking water?
Yes.
Well, the honourable lady raises a really important issue. My right honourable friend has commissioned a review of the whole system of regulation of the water companies. It's also the case we haven't built a new reservoir in Britain. I think I'm right in saying for 30 years. We have plans for 9 new reservoirs as part of answering the issue she raises.
Alistair Strathern.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I had the real pleasure of visiting York Road Nursery School in my constituency this morning to celebrate with them their securing of Green Flag Eco School status, with distinction, no less. Now, as well as a really quite sobering reminder of my inability to hold the attention of 4-year-olds for very long, it was also quite a powerful reminder of the future generations who will bear the brunt of our failure to take this crisis seriously. But the truth is we don't have to look to the future to see some of the costs now. Whether it's my local farmers or those hit by flooding, we're already feeling pain in Hitchin because of the failure to take climate change and the nature crisis seriously and tackle it head on. Yeah. So what assurance can the Secretary of State give my constituents that we won't be shying away, that we're tackling climate change at source, and we'll also be investing in some of the nature mitigations needed to tackle the issues we're already facing right across our towns and villages? Yeah.
Let me congratulate my honourable friend's school on what they're doing in their Green Flag status, which is really important. It shows that local action can really make a difference. And then globally, I can give him the assurance he seeks. And you know, what's so important, and I do say this to members across the House, people look to Britain. People look to Britain and people say, you know, are you going to lead? Are you going to show the power of example? Because that's what we've done over 20 years under governments of both parties. We need to keep doing it.
Yeah. Claire Nosmedi.
Secretary Ed, climate change is a huge threat to food security. In 2018, losses in the Welsh livestock sector due to extreme weather was £175 million, equivalent to 9% of the total Welsh agricultural output. Farmers need support to protect their livestock and crops. Will the Secretary of State listen to the concerns from the farming unions about the removal of the ring fence for Welsh agricultural funding, given this could mean less money for climate adaptation at a time when it's needed most to safeguard food security?
Well, I believe that the Honourable Lady raises an issue which is essentially devolved funding, and this funding is going to be devolved. But on the wider issue she raises about the costs that people are facing and farmers are facing, I think this is so important, because we're not talking about theoretical events and we're not talking about theoretical future costs. They're actually here now, and farmers are facing those costs, and she's right to draw attention to it.
Is he writing?
Deputy Speaker, when I speak to young people in Kettering, in fact when I'm having conversations with my friends, they tell me that they are worried about the future of the world we've inherited. So with that in mind, the climate delay rhetoric coming from the Tories and Reform is both deeply irresponsible and actually really disappointing. Yep. Can the Secretary of State outline, with that in mind, that it's only by working with urgency and action that my constituents will see restoration of our natural world and a world that we can pass on to the next generation?
I would say incredibly well, Madam Deputy Speaker. You know, this is an obligation that we owe to young people. We hold the planet in trust for future generations. And the young people of today, you know, they speak for themselves, but they speak for future generations. And frankly, we owe it to them to act when the evidence is before our eyes.
Dyke. Madam Deputy Speaker. The Met Office report and the Climate Change Committee made it clear that we're unprepared for climate change, with progress on food security and nature restoration either insufficient or limited. The Lang Partnership in Curry Rival have proudly championed regenerative farming and nature-friendly farming methods now for over 30 years. So what discussions has he had with his colleagues in DEFRA to ensure that farmers like the Langs can farm productively, sustainably and are resilient to a climate crisis?
Well, I congratulate the Honourable Lady's constituents on what they are doing to find sort of regenerative ways of doing farming. And I know it's something that my right honourable friend, the Environment Secretary, takes incredibly seriously. And we have structures in place that can help incentivise that. But look, I think he would say that, of course, we need to do more on these issues. And I think she put it very eloquently.
Rachel Maskell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend for making such a pertinent statement when the planet's in such a critical condition, and also for his leadership domestically and globally. The Bio-Yorkshire project will create 4,000 jobs, seeing that green transition, but also ensuring that we've got future agriculture at the highest level of science. Will he ensure that this government, unlike the last, fund that sufficiently so that we can really see that transition in farming, but also in other climate mitigating science?
I mean, it sounds like an incredibly exciting project, and I congratulate my honourable friend for raising it. And I think this is, in a way, on all sides of the House, or a number of sides of the House, you can hear the fantastic examples of what local people are doing. And in a sense, I think that should be our inspiration. Government is trying to do its bit, but local people in communities across Britain are doing theirs as well.
Sean Davis.
Speaker, tackling climate change is a top topic amongst children and young people when I visit schools and colleges across Telford. Switching to renewables is a top topic amongst employers who want to reduce the cost of supply to their energy. And renewable companies tell me about the fantastic well-paid jobs that are available. Climate security, environment security and energy security is national security. Does my right honourable friend have a single reason as to why this is not a key mission to rebuild Britain and protect our planet for generations to come?
Secretary of State.
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think this emphasis that he makes on national security is so important. You know, our exposure to fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators leaves us frankly exposed. That's what the last government did. This is an energy security issue, it's a national security issue, and that's why we need clean, homegrown power.
Deirdre Costigan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Secretary of State has outlined, the climate crisis is also a nature crisis, especially in nature-depleted cities like London. In recognition of this, Ealing's Labour Council has imaginative plans for a new regional park from Horsenden Hill in the north to Warren Farm in my constituency of Ealing Southall, creating new habitats, wetlands and rewilded areas. So does the Secretary of State agree that this government's new Nature Recovery Fund could help support initiatives like Ealing's Regional Park, and that, in contrast to the piecemeal approach of the previous government, the fund will allow a more strategic and effective approach to restoring our natural environment?
Secretary of State.
I think my honourable friend is right about this, and actually if we think about the recent hot weather, access to green spaces is like a massive issue, and it's a massive issue of inequality, because in certain parts of the country people have that access, and in certain parts of the country they don't. And I think the project that my honourable friend talks about sounds incredibly important.
Tom Collins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for establishing this on the agenda and raising it. Nothing could be more existential or vital than tackling our climate and nature crises. We live within the natural system, not outside it. We and nature are in this together, and so nothing could be more important or better to build as the foundation of how we shape our communities and our economy into the future. Industry understands this, and I've had the chance to convene industry to bring ideas forward, such as diversification of technologies we support and the build-out of a strategic national clean energy reserve. Would the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss these ideas that are coming from industry?
Secretary of State.
Well, definitely we look forward to discussing those ideas, and I think he's absolutely right about the interlocking nature of both the climate and nature crisis and climate and nature solutions. Both of them go together. There are big economic opportunities from them, and he is a great champion of them.
Anna Gelder.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does the Secretary of State agree that rural and coastal communities are on the front line of the climate and nature crisis, and that investment in clean energy, in nature recovery and in resilient infrastructure is not only essential for protecting areas like South East Cornwall, but also for unlocking new jobs, strengthening my local economy and ensuring our future national security?
Secretary of State.
Well, my honourable friend was a fantastic champion of these issues in her previous incarnation, and she is a fantastic champion of them in her current incarnation as well. And I know, her constituency and the work she is doing is absolutely about what she is talking about, and I couldn't agree with her more.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Rugby Borough Council and Warwickshire Wildlife Trust are hosting a Nature in Focus event this Sunday, and they're partnering together to buy trees for farmers to plant. And in December 2024, my right honourable friend joined me to visit the urban and civic-led Halton development, where we saw Francis Jackson Homes fitting air source heat pumps to their new build homes. We talked of our hope to go further. So does my right honourable friend agree that through the Future Homes Standard, which ensures that the vast majority of new builds will have solar panels, we are showing that a Labour government, and indeed Labour-led councils, actually believe in the concept of government and in taking responsibility, and that we can actually change things for the better for future generations?
I wish him luck with the event on Sunday, which sounds important, and he's absolutely right about this. The whole Warm Homes plan for millions of people is about cutting their energy bills, creating warmer homes and cutting emissions, and they go together.
Tracy Gilbert.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Met Office report today says that we need to put in place a highly localised network of rain gauges, as extreme rainfall can be very dangerous. In July 2021, Stockbridge in my Edinburgh North and Leith constituency faced flooding after a torrential downpour one afternoon following several days of soaring temperatures. A network of rain gauges will help analyse the impact of climate change, but also help communities such as Stockbridge prepare. Can my right honourable friend outline what plans the government has in this regard?
State.
Well, it sounds like a very, very important recommendation that my honourable friend draws attention to. And in fact, as somebody whose constituency saw 2 once-in-a-100-year flooding events within about a decade, I know from local experience how serious these issues are. I'm glad she's drawn my attention to this recommendation, and we will look carefully at it.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this government's focus on the urgency of the climate crisis, and I know that many climate activists in my constituency of Edinburgh East and Musselburgh will as well. because the evidence is unequivocal. Only sustained reductions in greenhouse gases will slow global warming, and the only way to do that is to accelerate the transition to net zero. So will the Secretary of State commit to staying resolute in the face of opposition on the commitment to net zero? And does he agree with me that as the first country to industrialise, the UK has a special responsibility to show global leadership in this area?
I think my honourable friend puts it incredibly well. As the Prime Minister says, action on clean energy and net zero is in the DNA of this government. You know, I was in government last time. Now we have a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who are more supportive of this agenda, who've moved it from the margins to the mainstream compared to anyone else before.
Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the Secretary of State's statement and particularly his encouragement for members right across this House to support the government's efforts to reach net zero by 2050 and indeed any future government who maintains that commitment. Does the Secretary of State therefore agree with me that the announcement by the newly elected Reform County Council in Kent to axe all investments in net zero is not only a betrayal of my constituents in Dartford, of residents right across Kent, but particularly young people who deserve to inherit a sustainable planet?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I wasn't aware of this announcement, but it sounds like it's anti-jobs, it's making people poorer, and it's a betrayal of future generations.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his really important statement to say. And can I say to him really gently, I was a Miller fan before it was cool. When I visit schools in my constituency of Harlow, including the wonderful Freshwaters Primary School I visited on Friday, and the Downs School, where one young child asked me about the declining number of blackbirds, the number one issue that students raise is climate change. What would the Secretary of State say to young people in Harlow about the action he has taken to protect my constituents who will face the cost of inaction themselves?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his kind words. Not quite sure how to deal with them. It's a tough one. Look, on reassuring his constituents in Harlow, I think it's been so interesting, Madam Deputy Speaker, hearing people across this House talk about these issues and their own constituents and the strong feelings there are. I'd say to young people in Harlow and people across Harlow that this is a government absolutely committed on these issues. We are determined to ensure that they inherit a livable planet.
And I thank the Secretary of State for his statement this afternoon. I'm going to allow a couple of moments for the front benches to change over.